Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Idiot Book Nook. My name is Blazewing. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them.
I am the reading dragon. My pronouns are she, her.
My name's Lady Punnet. My pronouns are primarily she, her, sometimes they, them. Today is a she, her kind of day.
And I'm Crittershy. My pronouns are she, her, they, them, and today is a she sprinkly day.
And joining us is author Old World Charm. Hello.
Hello, I am Old Will Charm, known as Charm, or as my government published name is, Arian Scalise. I go by he, him, sometimes hey you, and I'm here to have a good time.
Excellent. Love it. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much for allowing us the chance to sit down and interview you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You authored Lost in the Woods, and for the first few sessions, I was actually pronouncing that wrong, so my apologies on that.
No worries. Yeah, you've pronounced it in like a cool Celtic way, so I was like, you know what, like I'm not too bummed about it. But yeah, it is Lost in the Woods. So
If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can do so at lanktr.ee/idiotbooknook. You'll be able to find links to our podcast, to our YouTube, to all of our individual link trees. And I also have a link for Charm as well. Let me just go ahead and pull that up. That is who.be/oldworldcharm. That's hoo.be/oldworldcharm. I'm going to throw that in the chat for everybody who's live here with us on Twitch. If you happen to be watching a video recording, it'll pop up in the side chat there. You'll be able to see how it's spelled. So, how is everyone this morning?
Pretty
It's not
good.
morning, it's afternoon.
Close enough.
close enough, yeah.
How,
We're usually
Yeah.
doing things in the mornings. However, today is an interesting one.
how's the day gone for everyone?
Been going well. Yeah, it's just I don't know. It's one of those things where just when you're excited for something like this, nothing can stop you, no matter what obstacles the early day might have. I know some of us are, got autoimmune stuff, but there's something about psychologically being geared towards like building up your energy towards fun social interactions that make those tough, slow, sluggish, weird, dystopic body mornings turn out just fine.
I have to go rescue Grim from the curtain. Hold on, guys.
Oh no!
So, Crittershy here has a bird called Grim. Also happens to be in our logo. Is actually our mascot and is just a bit of a little shit.
Yes.
So,
And besides Grim, Lady Punnet has two cats, Nacho and Nugget. And then Blaze also has three cats,
yep.
Rasputin,
Monroe,
Monroe, and then
Bastet.
Bastet.
Oh,
And then I
great
myself
names.
have my cat, who is not in the office right now because he is also a little shit, but my cat's name is Zeus.
So,
And he, yeah.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, if you guys are seeing me talk and not hearing me, it's because I'm talking to my chat.
You're good.
Or the bird.
Or the bird.
So, we at this point have gone through this entire book. I gotta ask, how long did it take you to put this together?
So, I have been writing poetry since I could hold crayons, and it probably started on a particularly fun Mother's Day, and that's where it all started. And then it became a very important outlet for me during the high emotional, high hormone teenage youth of rock music and late night drives, and poetry just kind of vibes with that. Kind of started with a lyric format. I was I've had a few head injuries, so I couldn't really pursue my love of musical instruments because I have hand tremors. So I was like, poetry is kind of a thing. Yeah, um, I had a nasty football hit and I was in a plane crash, so I have really crazy like
You-
shaky hands.
Shit.
You were in a plane crash?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh my
I
god.
walked away from a fully destroyed plane with just me and the pilot, and then I picked up the pieces of that plane to put away so that the next plane coming in didn't crash into the debris of our plane.
Oh, shit.
So pretty weird. Yeah, had amnesia, the whole deal. But we'll get to that another time, or maybe later on in here. But to answer the question,
I
it took a
remember you
long time.
briefly touching on it in a Tuk Talk you did back in like 2019 or something like that, but I never the details.
I will tell you the whole story, even if you want, anytime you guys want, even here. But I also, I can ramble. So, but
That's wild.
it is. It is. Very few people can say that. But statistically, every plane I go on from now on is safer. That's at least what I tell myself. Because what are the odds of 2 plane crashes? But
That's the best way of looking at it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say it's a lifelong endeavor, honestly, this poetry anthology, and it's a start. And as I was talking to you guys before, kind of we got rolling, I was saying I really wanted to. I have a flaw where I wait till something feels perfect, or I have like an edge in the grasp of how I want it to be. But I'll tell everyone here listening, don't do that. Just do, be imperfect and move forward and get things done, because it causes this really amazing ripple effect. Doors will open. It's very, life imitates art imitates life, and it's almost like the way Dungeons and Dragons or video games are for my nerds. It's don't try to level up and get your stats going. Go through the dungeon, go explore, put yourself in that metaphorical danger of not being geared up for things, and see what you discover. And that poetry book ended up being that first step for me. It took a lot of time and effort to be organizationally minded to get this going. And through the acknowledgments in the front of the book, you kind of can see what really motivated me. It was family. It was a grandfather, a couple grandparents of mine as well. But one of my grandparents, my grandfather, he was kind of close to, I wouldn't say on his deathbed, but he was pretty much on his last days. He made me promise never to stop writing. And not that I was in any danger, but to have someone take the time in our last interactions to make a point to say, this is a thing that I admire and love about you. And he was a poet himself, and he had his own books of his own poetry that he never published. And I think there's a part of him calling out to me to just say, don't let your poetry just kind of sit in a binder that no one sees. Put it out there for other people. And since then, many people in chat have graciously told me that the poetry has somehow connected them on some level, or opened those doors that we were talking about. So yeah, that's how this came to be, a lifelong endeavor. And there's more poetry coming on the way. I'm doing a spicy poetry next, because that seems to be a whole nother level that doesn't overlap with this too much.
I mean, you're also very good at doing the eluding spicy poetry as well. So
yeah, so what you guys are actually in physical possession of was a limited edition. There's only 100 books, as I said before, printed of the ones you guys are holding now. And after that, I got a lot of feedback from people saying, like, I really want to share this with like some of the young adults in my life, but some of the poems in there are just too much. And I'm like, I understand. And this is even feedback getting from like my brother, who's like, he has preteen kids. He's like, they love poetry. I want them to hold their uncle's poetry book, but there's some of these poems I'm like, I don't know what to do to explain to them what you're actually saying without either lying about your poems or exposing them to a part of you that I don't think they want to know about. And I said, that's actually a really good point. So what the poetry book that's actually on the Amazon sold is actually a little bit cleaned up for that. And so the spicy ones, there's like 4 poems that have been taken out, 4 poems that have been added in. And basically it's inspired me to take that whole energy of all that spiciness and put it into a separate book. So that's why. But yeah, you guys are holding one, in your hands, like I said, a limited edition that has access to a couple very good eluded, had fun playing with it. But the next one won't be it won't dance around. It'll be pretty in your face.
Nice choice of words.
Thank you. Intended.
So,
We had a camera adjustment.
you good?
just gotta tilt your camera down a little bit, because we can only see from here up. There we go.
So, do any of you have any questions you'd like to ask.
What were some of the challenges that you came across when getting your book put together and published, like throughout the entire process of it, personal and professional?
That's a good question. So getting the courage to put myself out there in a way I couldn't control, because whenever we share poetry, we feel like we're being pretty brave by saying, "Oh, I'm gonna read this poem. I'm gonna share this with someone," or you get to the point where you're on stream, but you still have some control of like, what's how things are being said, how what's being received, what's being digested. Kind of being under the awareness that when you put a book out there, you're not there to read it to them. You're not there to talk with someone about it. They're getting their own world of impressions about your inner workings, correct or incorrect, and letting that kind of resonate with them in a vacuum. And I have to like really be comfortable with that because I'm the kind of person that's like, I want to engage people when I share something of myself. I want to be there to witness what it evokes, or I want to be at the very least make sure that a piece of me isn't misinterpreted, which I think is a personal thing for me. Is like my greatest and one of my only social anxieties is being perceived as something I'm not, positive or negative. Like I never want someone to think of something I've said and interpret it in such a way where I'm speaking so highly of myself that I think that I'm on a high horse, or that people think that, I make a joke about who I am and something about myself that they think I don't have the self-esteem that I have. So there's or the range of emotions involved in poetry that might say like, you can make any assumption about anyone from a poem they've written, but until you really speak to them in their heart and where it came from, you're not going to ever really know. But there is a romance to the ambiguity of poetry, because poetry belongs to the reader is kind of what I came to the conclusion of it, not the writer.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah, I think that actually really delves into, I think, the question that I have had is how you got around that anxiety of like other people reading your thing without like you being there to monitor their reaction.
Right.
Because it's a big jump, especially when, like you said, like poetry is something extremely personal on some levels. It's a lot more, you can reveal a lot more of yourself through something like poetry than through like fiction writing or anything like that. So did it take you a while to get comfortable with it, or is it still something you're actually adjusting to?
It's to really be honest, I got over it quickly. But it wasn't like it was easy. It was like I had to just make a decision then and there and say, if I'm in for a penny, I'm in for a pound. Like I have to commit and have no trepidations. I can't hold back certain poems. I can't keep certain poems to myself if I'm putting out a poetry anthology. I want it to be a representation of what the poetry book is all about, which is of love, loss, and learning about oneself, and really reflecting the mind state of from being a young adult into an adult and encountering a lot of what I would consider the quintessential life experiences, the things that actually kind of make you human, and try to give them words. An impossible task, but I had to kind of say I can't censor myself. I can't hold things back. I have to be cool with it. And through that kind of just talking myself into this, I thought at the end of my life, if I am talking to my grandchild, I want to be able to say, that there's nothing sitting on a shelf in dust that could have been in someone's hands in light.
Mm-hmm.
So
that kind of reminds me of one of the poems that you did from this book, the one titled Close to the Vest. When we first read this as a book club, how dare you call me out like that, sir?
I love that. I actually am very curious to know which poems called each of you, because each of you are so brilliantly unique and yet have this amazing mesh together as a group. I'd love to know what calls you out and why. So what about Close to the Vest, if I may ask you, if we want to actually read it and And
in particular, the part, all you wanted was a good time for a short time with someone who'd make time. Even the gods will not be here forever. So when as a book club we're going through this part, this was also happening during a time that still being fresh out of my last relationship and then just having been ghosted by the first gentleman to show some interest in me, and then me constantly telling this guy, hey, let's go slow because I just got out of some real heavy bullshit,
right.
and then proceeded to then ghost me after attempting to love bomb me, and then try to attempt telling one of my close friends that I was the one doing the love bombing.
Oof.
So
Wow, I can see why this connected to you then.
it's like, well,
Yeah.
shit. And
Um,
this guy knew that I was going to be moving, and he and I were talking about like him helping me a little bit with this move too, but I wanted to have a further conversation about that to see, okay, what actually would you be capable of doing
mhm.
physically and otherwise?
And to that, I kind of recite the next stanza or piece of line that actually might really fit here, is that all ends are healing as long as you begin anew again.
Yeah.
Um,
Which kind of talks of, like for me, is like, oh, hey, you're going to be starting over anyway in a place that you're unfamiliar with again.
mhm. Yeah. And it's daunting, it's frustrating, but it's I think that in terms of comfort and thinking about those incredibly frustrating cycles of trying to start over, I think very few things are so equally frustrating and terrifying in the unknown element of what now, what next, what do I do with myself. I would say that as long as you think of life in terms of a cycle and circle instead of a linear path, you'll be a little bit happier knowing that you can count on some reliability of the constant, which is you are the constant, everything else is the variable. And if you treat yourself like a variable, of course it's going to suck because you feel like you have no certainties. You have no solid ground to stand on. But it's like we lean on our experience. I've done it before, I'll do it again, and I'll do it better.
Yeah,
So
because the last time I had gone through an experience similar to this, not necessarily romantically, but just a giant life change where I had to leave everyone and everything behind and start over.
mhm.
This happened around 2012, 2013.
Mhm.
And this was back in the beginning of that year of 2013. And I actually had become homeless with my grandmother. So we were sleeping in between a hotel room and her vehicle. And then my aunt, who lives up here, found out about it. And she got me a one-way ticket flight to Idaho.
Mhm.
And
Idaho.
It's a story that tells itself.
Yeah. I mean, this was also right after I went through that phase of my life. But
it's closely connected, weirdly enough. Hyper
yeah,
independence and sexuality.
super weirdly enough. And so seeing as I've had, and also before that, leaving my dad and effectively kicking him out of my life because my father was a narcissistic sociopath throughout my childhood. And it was in my senior year of high school that I finally had developed enough of the courage to finally start standing up to him and start throwing shit back at him, to the point where he actually just up and left me to fend for myself at the ripe old age of 17.
Oof.
Yeah. So there were a lot of similarities between my own biological father and the situation I had just gotten out of earlier this year. However, the major difference is the choice to start over somewhere else and to finally take that step of moving out of state, something that I had been talking to even my ex about for a few years. It's my choice, and I get to have that choice this time. And having the knowledge that I have from 11 years ago, being able to implement that into how to best handle things this time has been a real big help too. And I'm super freaking grateful that I have the support group that I have this time, because I didn't have that last time.
Yes. Like I'm seeing, if I may, like I'm totally happy to. I'll answer any questions anyone has. Pretty much, if I can, I will. And so I try to temper that aspect of me when I talk to people, because I forget people aren't the same. But it sounds like you're experiencing that, what I was talking about, that circle, that loop or spiral, if we may, because there's a transition of journey element to it. You're not we're not literally walking in circles here. We're actually moving through space. But it sounds like that idea of I want to say like abandonment tied with upheaval, having to go somewhere that you don't know what's going to happen next, and you might not want to be, but you have to be. It feeling like it's not in your hands, but once again, you kind of remind yourself, just as you are now, going towards this, the East Coast, it's you that you can count on, and it shouldn't be felt so young as 17 to realize that in the world. But with a support group backing you, it's like, you've got your support team, you've got your bards and clerics inspiring you, giving you the healing, giving you the buffs, and sending you forward to tank the hits of life, and you can and you will, because the alternative is not to get to see further into the story.
Yeah, and especially with how things have been going here in Idaho, not only socially, there's also the political strife that's been going on, and we're also kind of going through our own little housing crisis at the moment with the gouging of prices and whatnot. It doesn't make sense for me to try to make things work here anymore, especially with how it's very limited in what type of work you can actually do out here.
Yes.
That is actually, how do I put this? Because of my flavor of neurospicy, I have to do things a certain way, and I have to have my schedule a certain way. And while I do work retail outside of this, the job that I have currently has been great with working with me on that. And I am part of a company that I can actually transfer within. And that's what I'm currently doing in moving to the East Coast, is transferring from this location to the locations over there. And I just need to make sure that the HR over there knows, hey, this is how I do things, and this is like my schedule, the schedule I have. I don't mind it if you have me hired on as part-time, as long as I have this schedule to prevent me from having the burnout that I have been prone to experience without this schedule. And so they've been really great about that so far.
Back onto the topic of the poetry book that we're discussing, the waffle poem lacks waffles.
Oh my god, I knew that was going to come up. I was not expecting to come out so quickly, but it does lack waffles. I guess you want an explanation for why it lacks waffles.
Yes.
Yeah, where
are the waffles?
Um,
It's very important to me to know where the waffles are. Nugget 2. Nugget's waiting to know why there was no waffles in the waffle poem.
I can tell that you take great offense to the lack of waffles. Do we have a lot of waffle lovers here in the current company?
Waffles. I like both waffles and pancakes, though.
I have my own waffle iron.
I had a Mickey Mouse waffle iron growing up.
Well, to answer the quandary of the waffle poem lacking waffles, this poem was written in the company of its recipient while in the time that they were eating a waffle. I had finished the poem before they finished their food, and I decided to call it waffle poem to kind of commemorate the aspect of that memory of basically conjuring a certain kind of word magic in that I don't know how to describe it, in the aura of someone completely oblivious to what I was doing. And being able to hand someone a poem, written in such a way where it looked like it had taken, days or weeks to really define the aspects of its meaning, but just really sitting in the dawn-cast glow of someone's good company while they enjoy some yummy food.
That sounds
I
pretty
like
good
how I-
creation.
We have started a small war in the chat too about
Oh, boy.
pancakes and waffles.
I mean, waffles are just pancakes with abs.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Pockets. Waffles are
With
pancakes.
pockets.
Technically, there is a difference in the batter, but
Critter,
I love this.
what poem got to you?
I would say there's probably two that jump out just thinking about it. Man of Dueling Fates.
That one was a good one.
His beautiful, her handsome.
Any reason?
I guess the first one because it reminds me of someone very important to me. And kind of the same reason for the other one. Is
I
it,
love
it
that.
yeah. It's yeah.
It's a pretty insightful thing to tell. Like I'm getting so much out of you just saying that those two poems remind you of the same person.
Yes.
Yeah, that tells a lot about your very deep connection. That means you have seen more than more than anyone else has seen of that one human being, if that is your answer.
Probably, yeah.
And that's a pretty incredible and special thing.
On a more serious note, aside from the waffle poem, To Destroy an Immortal was also a favorite of mine because of the fact that when people say, oh, well, wouldn't you want to live forever? No. It sounds like it would get very lonely. I would outlive everybody. It'd just be super upsetting to me, and my time would probably be wasted. Also, there was tattoos and good intentions because it started off all sweet, and then out of nowhere it got spicy out of nowhere.
I think I was here when you read that one for the first time.
It threw me through a loop.
Oh my god. Critter, was tattoos and intentions part of an inspiration to your vampire character?
No, actually.
Aww.
But I could see why you would think that, yeah.
Oh, now we have to go read that poem again, so that way you could like see if that would be a thing you could like put towards your character.
You know, speaking of which, you guys do something so unique that I love. I don't think I ever like publicly acknowledged, or maybe I did, but I can't say it enough. But when you associated a D&D element to poetry was just, I love that. It is. I hope you always do that, whether it's, you know, just the class thing or just the scene in your minds. I found that incredibly relatable. I know some people might find that niche, but it at least draws people into how poetry and D&D are not really all that distant in how you can, as long as you have the imagination to enjoy one, you have the imagination to enjoy the other. So I love that you guys did that.
In both cases, you're effectively telling a story with your words.
If I'm not mistaken,
Yeah, absolutely.
If I'm not mistaken, that was actually an impromptu thing and started by Lady Punnet. So
yes,
yep.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, I think it was
Blaze,
because
what about
I made.
you?
What's that?
I was gonna ask Blaze if she had any poems that hit her in the gut.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In the gut.
I've got one. The stories we tell. As somebody who is learning to be a storyteller, as somebody who's going through that currently, and learning to look kind of for the meaning behind things, this poetry book hit me a bit differently than a lot of others have. I was never really good at poetry in school. It's one of the areas that I lacked, that I kind of point blank sucked at. The stories we tell, I can feel the journey with this one. Kind of, you know, having to look underneath and having to embrace that basic element of humanity before you can actually start talking to other people about things. The emotion, but at the same time, even though, you know, it can be a very modern thing, storytelling for us as a species has been around
It's ancient.
as long as we've been around, effectively,
Yeah.
as long as we've been able to communicate. We don't necessarily take the time to stop and think about that. Just, this ancient tradition that we're still taking part in today.
Mm. I love that. And I love that. I love how each of you kind of picked poems that kind of give me a little bit more insight to what each of you care about. Some of you picked a poem that regards to, your own journey right now as it stands. Some people picked a poem. Some people picked a poem that responds to a connection you have with someone very close to you. Some of you have kind of described a poem that talks about your past, that talks to your past, and it really is awesome to acknowledge the power of stories. As a professional storyteller, I don't think anything is more defining to my life than my ability to tell stories, and that's why I think when I take care of my health, I make sure to take care of the parts of me that are capable of telling stories. And in the priority to myself, it's like I'll chew off my own arm before I give up my voice. So hopefully I don't have to. But when you get through kind of I don't know how to say this, but after having cancer, there's a point in the stages of those moments of hardship and grief where you do bargain to whatever gods are out there, and you're just like, what do I care about? What would I? They get to when you get to the bargaining phase of grief, you really do go and talk crazy. Like, I will give up this to keep this, and it speaks to how powerful in storytelling those moments of pact making, of deals, of bargaining with patrons or gods. Because in the moment, we're really looking at something so transactional, but it's more than that. It really. I mean, there's really no way to overstate. If any of you have ever been in a moment where you catch yourself just in the closest thing to prayer as a non-religious person, you kind of realize how I don't know, flipped on its head everything is for you in those moments. So yeah.
The raw emotion that I felt as we were going through this book is unlike anything I have read in a very long time. This is a very personal thing, and to be able to capture that in words, that is a gift. So
high praise. And you have shared your poetry, as I recall, and I say that you undersell yourself. Maybe that you speak of who your poetry, what your poetry used to be, but as it stands, your poetry is to be heard. So I hope you pursue that. You share more of it.
I concur.
Same.
Thank you.
Take our praise, damn it. Take it.
I'm not good at that. So.
Take our love.
Suddenly, there's all these praise doms. Take it.
Thank you very much. That means a lot. I'm actually working on poetry and another writing project, actually, that both of which I hope to be published at some point. It has been one of my longest held goals to be a published author under my own name instead of in a collective work. So thank you for the encouragement.
Yeah, go for it. You are the only obstacle, truly. No one has power over stopping you. Thankfully, in the world of publishing, you can do it.
What were you going to say, Lady Bonnet?
Well, I'm kind of in a similar way where I've had this idea for a children's book for a couple of years now, and the only thing that's kind of stopping me from making it is myself. So yeah.
I mean, that's the only person who can stop you. And when I realized that, I was like, okay, that gets that conversation again of, why am I waiting? Is it because I want it to be perfect, or is it because I'm afraid of, the other elements of, I can't control. It's out of my hands. But it's been one of the best parts of my life is reaching that goal. It had been a goal of mine, a long-standing goal, to have something in my hands. And the reason for that was, having so many near-death experiences so early on in my life, I realized I realized I really wanted something of me to be left behind,
Mm-hmm.
to be of positive, value in my own mind, to feel a sense of permanence. And when I hold a book like, Alexander Dumas's Count of Monte Cristo or Three Musketeers, I feel like I'm connecting
Mhm.
to a man who is completely, misinterpreted in the assumptions from movies and things like that. But when you read the book, you do see a man who had a love of adventure instilled in him, a man who, comes from a very amazing, defined heritage of a time of dreamers, which you could argue every generation has the element of being a time of dreamers. Because there are always those dragons in every era to face. But when you read about or read the work of someone who is connected to fiction, I would argue that you are holding a time machine. Um, and I wanted that. I wanted someone down the way to hold my poetry book, and get a little bit closer to me, and maybe even go so far back as to go, wow, I really love this, want to get to know more. And in an age of information, to be able to Google or find old Twitch streams of me and being like, oh wow, he tells an amazing story in D&D, or he seems exactly like I'd hoped, or maybe they learned something new, because without that, I wouldn't have learned that Alexander Dumas was an incredible, a person of an incredible life beyond his books. He was, um, the child of a high-ranking military officer and a African slave, and
Oh,
being
wow.
half black in France, and a writer, no less. He had so many obstacles for people to even perceive his work to be of any value during that time, and he now holds. I mean, I can't speak highly enough of him. He's probably one of my favorite authors of all time because of the way he hits a story through the emotional loops that almost feels like poetry in a way. So,
Mhm.
We have
like I
somebody.
said,
We have somebody in the audience that wants to know about your planned children's book, or has requested that we ask you about your planned children's book.
Yeah.
yeah. So I do have, I have an order of operations in my mind of like wanting to go through the boxes
Mm-hmm.
of different. I've got my poetry book, I've got a spicy poetry book, and then I have a children's book. And I started writing a children's book when I was very, very, very sick with COVID and had a super
Mm.
fever, and I was like hallucinating.
Oh shit.
And I just started writing, apparently, because that's all I could do, laying in bed, like in my own sweat. And when I woke up and kind of broke the fever, I read like this insane. I wouldn't even call it a children's book, but it's called Feet Asleep Chocolate Cake. Um, and and
Best
it's
title ever.
yeah, Feet Asleep
We're reading that book.
Chocolate Cake. And apparently that I'll give you a synopsis of this children's book, because I don't want to reveal too much. I try not to talk about too many things before they come into existence. But um, apparently, in my time of being feverishly delusional, I had gotten up, and my legs were asleep from being bedridden for so long that I couldn't walk. So I was in this state of being super fever, completely wrecked, basically navigating getting my hands on leftover chocolate cake that I had in my fridge for some reason, because I was so hungry and I was crazy. I probably my blood sugar was dropping or something. And so I'm like falling everywhere down the hallway to get up my hands on this cake. And once I got my hands on the cake, it was a game of like, do I stand here and eat it, or do I fight my way back down the hallway to get back in bed and eat this cake? But it was its own journey. And what the story somehow represented that I wrote was a reflection of a children's book about how important it was to get this chocolate cake, despite the misfortunes of having your legs not work. And it's just a silly, written through the voice of a children's book. It's actually cute and fun and nonsensical in the way children's books should be, to make children giggle. Imagining the falling into a trash can and trying not to drop some cake.
That's amazing.
Love it.
So,
Oh,
Speaking
boy.
as someone who had COVID, I can totally relate to the whole delirious fever
Yes.
dreams situation. It's not. It's both. It's funny when I look back at at it now, but I was not having fun when I had it, because the worst part of that was I asked my mom to come over because I thought I just had the flu, because we had a nasty flu going around. And I was like, Mom, I don't have COVID. I've taken like 3 rapid tests. I'm fine. I just need you to pick me up like a thermometer and some cold medicine. And her being my mom, and we have a very good relationship, she, of course, comes over with that plus 3 bags of groceries. Find out I have COVID, have to call her, be like, Mom, you got to get tested. I don't want you and stepdad to get COVID, because stepdad is immunocompromised right now.
Oh my
Luckily,
God.
she didn't get it. But then I had like the worst 4 days ever. And Nacho and Nugget were so confused because they're like, why are you still here? You're usually at work by now. Like, we'll cuddle with you, even though you're too warm. And it's like,
Yeah.
you're the goodest boys.
Aw, yeah, we don't deserve them.
Yeah, no.
What else? Sorry.
I've only been so sick that I've hallucinated twice. That was one of them, and ironically, the other time was when I was in Mexico. So heads up to Tabletop Fortress. But I apparently, going to Mexico comes with its own risks, even especially on a cruise ship. Actually, to be honest, there's the illusion of any kind of separation from all the things that you would avoid, including sickness. But I got so sick that I was hallucinating that Smurfs were crawling all over the room telling me about government conspiracies. And that was definitely one of the biggest mind fucks I've ever had in my life, because I had never done hallucinogenics. I didn't know that I'd never had a hallucination before. So to have an actual visual and auditory hallucination where you're like, I'm awake, but it feels like I'm dreaming, unless this is real, in which case I have great big problems. And it's not just the Smurfs, it's the government.
Smurfs. That's just
the Smurfs were telling me all about, Smurfs telling you all about all kinds of government conspiracies. So, yep.
I'm curious, like, for another time, but I'm totally curious as to what they were telling you, like what conspiracies they were telling you. Again, probably a conversation for another time, but oh my God.
You know what? I think there's... yeah, we can get into this another time, and I promise you I will happily get into the overlap of what the Smurfs were telling me and what ends up actually being real in our world. I'm sure there was...
Yeah. You actually looked it up after? Oh God.
Yep. And what's crazy is finding out about things that I'm constantly... In fact, in my streams, I'm surrounded by amazing, knowledgeable people who are so connected with aspects of history I've never known. You've heard, and this, my chat's we're in here right now, are gonna love this, and I'm bringing this up because I recently found out about George Washington's wooden teeth. Are you familiar with this?
You just found out about it?
His teeth were never wooden. The whole thing about wooden teeth was actually to conceal that they were actually slave teeth. That they replaced their missing teeth with teeth of the slaves.
Yep.
And that is why I'm like, I need to learn more about history away from any public school book or any kind of government sanctioned book I've ever had. And thankfully, I am surrounded by brilliant, educated people to make sure that I do not get hoodwinked by these misnomers such as, oh yeah, wooden teeth. No, it was actually real people teeth and the teeth of very healthy slaves.
That's messed up.
Yep,
Mhm.
It is.
I wonder if Tabletop Fortress knows this, because he used to teach history.
Yeah.
He actually had to split, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I'll ask him another time when
Ask
he's
him.
not banned from his own server.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's on a cruise right now, and the cruise just happens to be in Mexico. So.
Yep.
I do have a question that we wrote prior
Yes.
to the interview here, actually. Something that it wasn't me that wrote it. It was one of my other co-hosts here. But if 10 words make it onto the final page, how many words didn't?
If 10, what was the question?
If 10 words make it onto the final page, like onto the final draft for publishing, how many words didn't? Do you...
Oh, okay.
Do you, like, whittle things down, or do you just, word vomit all over the page? What's your process like?
Was there a murder board?
You know, there was it came down to wanting to make sure I put everything out there for me to kind of really look at, to find an order for it all, because in poetry books you have to actually really balance the flow of poem to poem, not just in subject matter but in size, in digestibility and content, by the visual aesthetic of how some poems look. And I actually you'd be surprised how much I considered the way that when you look at 2 pages, what those 2 pages don't, the feng shui, the energy coming off that page doesn't, feel like the garish light of the sun, or too much of a mess skewed on a table. So that was a big start. All those factors mattered. And then there were just some poems that I felt like were, how sometimes you'll write a poem and then later on you'll write another poem that was pretty much almost very similar to that, but just a better version. And the 2 poems could be completely different in ways, but it's like, why post what that poem kind of seems to capture in message, meaning, or feeling when it has a less refined, or why post the less refined one when you have a more refined one. So trying to avoid redundancy was a big part of the obvious for me, to kind of go, okay, this is a bit redundant. I don't need these poems that feel like, it was just too close to clouding up the pages with that. And then there are just some poems that I'm like, this doesn't represent me and my best work. I'm not afraid of showing people the process of my work, but I don't need it to be immortalized. I didn't want what felt like too rough of a draft, and with the intention of not like hiding it from the world, but just say, I want to work on that later. I want to pick that up another time. And with the time frame I had, I didn't really want to just stuff every poem I'd ever kind of written and somewhat liked into it. I just had to really be honest with myself and say, trust my intuition. And yeah, I did have to kind of nix a bunch of poems that I kind of told myself, I'll get back to that. In the same way that, we a lot of people kind of imagine poets kind of rip up the page, throw it over their shoulder. I don't really do that. I enjoy coming back to an old journal and flipping through it and seeing the really undeveloped thoughts, because they will inspire something in a more developed version of myself. It's the closest you can get to a conversation with your past self. Really, really, we would love that, to have that, because you think that it would just be, oh, I'm just talking to myself like I am now, but no way. Those emotions, those different, fears, hopes, and dreams of your younger self. I always joke that if I got a chance to talk to my younger self and tell them, hey dude, you're gonna go through some shit. You're gonna lose a testicle to cancer. You're gonna go through a plane crash. You're gonna discover, you're gonna meet siblings that you didn't know you had through a biological father who sowed his oats. You're gonna get your heart broken, absolutely thrashed. You're gonna meet some amazing people. You're gonna have some crazy experiences, and then you're gonna be a professional dungeon master. I think my younger self would shit himself. He'd probably be like, wait, we lose a nut? And then he'd go like, oh, it's worth it. That's probably what he'd say. Or so I hope. But you got to really think about, when you read an old poem or old piece of work, you're getting close to, unfortunately, a one-sided conversation. It's more them talking to you than you talking to them. But there's romance to that.
Pretty much.
We have a question in the chat, actually. Are there poems that you want to hide from the world because they are so special?
Yeah. I think I wouldn't say because they're so special, without kind of like, that's, there are poems that are just kind of for me, or there are poems that are for people who are no longer around, in whatever context, whether they are no longer alive and it was just for them, or they the version that I was connected to is no longer alive, and there's no need to put that out there in the world as a non-consensual flag, if that makes sense, kind of, because there's certain people in our lives when you step away, there's just this, the cleanest breaks are the best ones, and there's no need to put a poetry book with a poem that belongs to someone who no longer wants that wants the reminder of that. And they might go out of their way to find out, hey, holy shit, this guy I once knew and had a really, interesting connection with, published a poetry book, and he has given me poetry in his love language. And then to find that poem in that book, I think would be kind of offensive. So there are many reasons to kind of keep poems out of a poetry book, whether they're just for myself or to the memory of something.
Fair. Dragon, Critter, any other questions from you?
Speaking of poems to otherwise keep to yourself, or poems that you want to share with the world, you mentioned earlier that you had come across, I believe it was your dad's or your grandpa's poetry.
Yeah.
So have you thought about possibly fulfilling their dreams of having their poetry published and publishing their book on their behalf?
My grandfather, when he passed away, my grandmother kind of really went through all his poems, and I've considered it. I think at the time, enough time has passed that I could have that conversation with her without it being kind of sad. So I would definitely consider publishing his work. I think the world deserves to see some of it, because he was incredibly talented. We actually, get to a point where you get to the degree of talent that you could have an argument about poetry and its structure. And actually both be right. It's such a fun thing. He was old school. He loved iambic pentameter. He loved rhyme schemes. And he hated that some of my poems had no rhyme schemes or had no sensible rhyme schemes. And so there's a bias every now and then when I write a poem just free flow, that I have to fight not to rhyme, because I grew up with rhyme, like I said, like a lyricism in mind, and great songs tend to have a more memorable take to them if they do rhyme. But I think that poetry speaks to itself as a confession that needs to be made, and if it happens to rhyme, that's how it's gonna be. There's no wrong way. But he insisted on rhyme, and in fact, I to his credit, I still remember certain lines of his poetry because they rhyme. I remember certain poetries because he managed to keep a really fun limerick lyrical style, and he could make a serious topic seem a bit more interesting with rhyme. He wrote a poem called "Time is a Master Thief." And he actually wrote it very much about aging, because he was one of those old people whose body was wrecked, but his mind was sharp, and he hated it. He said it's the worst thing he's ever experienced, is being so incredibly bright and sharp in his mind, and having a body that does not listen to him, and not be able to walk or move, or to be such a passionate writer and not be able to connect with your fingertips, to be a passionate lover and not connect with your body, with your partner, to watch yourself kind of lose all those things that connect you to the outside world through a sharp mind. I think he insisted that he would rather have his mind completely melt in a good body than a good mind in a melting body. So really makes you think. And I don't know if I commiserate with that, because I haven't gotten to that point yet, and who knows if I ever will. But there is a certain bliss in certain things, and you don't know until you talk to someone, or hey, read their poem about it.
Yeah.
I kind of actually relate to that, because my grandma, she's kind of going through the same thing right now, where her body, she's not physically capable of doing a lot of things. However, she still prides herself in having a sharp mind. However, she and I also just found out that we're at risk of Alzheimer's. And she only just found out through her sister, and her sister only just found out because those two are now no one in that side of the family have lived for as long as they have. And so now my grandma is just kind of really scared and concerned about that, because one thing that she would always tell me is, if her mind goes, just cut the line. And because she would rather be gone completely, mind, body, and spirit, and just be gone from this world, than actually be in a situation where she loses her wit, her sense of self, her mind effectively. And she already hates the fact that her body doesn't do what it used to be able to do when she was like our age. And her mind is, as you had put it for your granddad, as sharp as a whip or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he could. My family's love language is making fun of each other, so it's awesome to shock people by getting in bouts of stinging insults with you and an elderly man, and then watch the eyes of shock grow even wider when the elderly man whoops your ass with the verbal assault of cunning wit. And so they're like, "Oh my God, how dare you pick on your grandpa by saying that?" And then watch his grandpa whoops everyone's ass. They're like, "Never mind, he can take it, he can dish it." But keep in mind that his perspective was this: he would rather be in a perfectly amazing body in a melty mind than the inverse, because of what he was uniquely dealing with. And the only person who suffers in that regard are the people around you, should there be some. You're the ones who care about you.
Yeah.
I think his ultimate hope was just not to suffer himself anymore. And I wouldn't call him selfish for that, but for him to be, blissfully unaware of his pain, of his world, of his loss, like he was in a flesh prison, to be keenly aware of every moment. He would rather be lost to the ambiguity of confusion. To his mind, there was a mercy in that. Now, to anyone else who feels differently, it's because you're watching someone you love. You're on the outside. You're seeing their moments in and out, in and out. But there are moments to be spoken for them that they're just not aware.
Fair.
And that is a mercy, because when they are aware, that's awful.
Critter, any questions from you?
Do you try to keep to a schedule when it comes to, do you I have to write this much by this time, or is it just when it happens, or do you need somebody behind you to be like, hey, you haven't written in X amount of time, go do that?
This is a good question. Yeah, so this is important. If you need someone behind you, you're not ready. Just as a general person, this is an opinion piece here. If you need really someone to really push you, you don't want it. You're not ready for it. And that's a matter of not saying like you don't deserve it. It just means certain circumstances in your life right now have not aligned you, or maybe you just haven't found a footing in your mental health or energy, because work, because whatever it is draining you is more important, because you need to allocate to the resources around you. Not to say that dreams need to be ignored for a great deal of time, but a dream that is ignored will leave. And you got to be very mindful of that. So I motivated myself because I was at risk of losing my dream, as every passing year brings itself a sense of dread of, is it too late? The case is, it's never too late. But I'll say this: I've spent 15 minutes every day writing, or what in the allotted time I had. I wouldn't say necessarily every day, but I made sure there was 15-minute increments. And the purpose of this, I thought, worked for me, and I hope it works for anyone who hears about this. Is we as writers know that if we're feeling, if we're feeling it, and it takes hold, that 15 minutes turns into hours. You'll be gone from reality.
Absolutely.
If in 15 minutes time you don't drift into that state, that almost like supers the trans state, that beautiful flow state, then that's not the time and day for you for that. And you just, at the very least, you'll feel great that you gave yourself the chance. You will feel free of guilt. You will feel like you did your best and you deserve that much to feel that way, as opposed to the guilt that comes with, I didn't even try for 15 minutes, which is a very real guilt once you set into that pace. So there are days, I couldn't get into it. And you know what? I was free. I absolved myself. And I was like, oh man, I'm going to sleep good tonight. And who knows, actually later that night I'd wake up and just start writing again. It's like, joke's on you. You're not going to sleep at all. But then you enter the flow state because you gave yourself 15 minutes. And it really is true that if you don't put yourself in that position to enter the flow state, you're never going to get it done. So
I'm thinking one more round of questions from myself and the co-host here. I don't want to keep you too long and whatnot. Let's start with Dragon.
Actually, we're about to have a question from
Oh.
Spiff Shine as well.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Once they
I love chat's questions. You guys are awesome.
Absolutely.
They have a question relating to a poem on the topic that we were talking about previously too. So I guess we're just waiting on them to mention what that question is. One of the questions that I did have earlier, throughout the process, this is kind of related to your experience as publishing your own book for the first time. What was your favorite part about putting everything together and going through the entire process itself, and what was your least favorite part?
My favorite part was reconnecting with a piece of myself I'd lost due to the amnesia that I had from the brain injury. The plane crash caused amnesia. The PTSD caused amnesia. I lost a lot of memories of a lot of people, a lot of things. I wish I had journaled, and I wish I had a diary. And I actually did have, you go through all this old stuff. The best part, and pardon me if I get emotional on this, but the best and part are the worst are the same, and that is finding pieces of who you were and how well and how highly that version of you was regarded by people you don't know anymore, or a part of yourself, especially a part of yourself you don't know anymore. It wrecked me going through the old stuff and finding these letters of people writing, love letters or just meaningful old friendships letters or poetry that was just like, it was like constantly wiping your hand across a fastly fogging window, trying to see something on the other side. As fleeting and as small of a window that was, it was agonizing to frustrating to not know what was beyond it, to not see it enough, to not get the full picture because of a brain that had had suffered some wiring damage and fully repaired to an extent of any measurable value, but it was really, really, really emotionally hard. I grieved. It's almost like grieving multiple deaths in that span of time. Every person that is I couldn't remember, but I was like, how could I dare forget someone who wrote a love letter like this, or I wrote a letter to like this. It's like, what the fuck? Really messed with you. And then just kind of moving on from that to the next thing and the next piece of my life, like writing about, how excited I was about something that I no longer connect to, or someone that I no longer connect to, or finding pieces of poems of places I no longer know where the hell they are. It's like I would give almost anything to be able to find where that place was again. It's lost, but at the same time, the sweetest part in the inverse, the kind of curving sweep, is to know that the places that I'm moving towards hold a fathomless potential of sharing that and holding that and exposing myself to the desire to travel and discover. I'm now of a deep burning fire to uproot myself, to not be fearful of the unknown, and to, like I said, we talked about, to go and live somewhere new for a few years, to go overseas, go to Europe and expose myself to culture, because I know my writing will benefit my ability to look back on what will be my future is going to be more exciting to me than what I've lost in my past. So the goal is to be okay with having forgotten more fun and amazing and beautiful things than most people will remember, and be acceptance of that.
Spiff Shine's question in the chat about losing yourself to Alzheimer's or the like. This is how I read The Man of Wood and Wine, page 15. I read this in surgery and read it as a person trying to find themselves again, or at least their old self, seeing familiar glimpses but not connecting anymore.
I didn't know if you were going to continue on.
No, that's pretty much it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so Man of Wood and Wine is actually one of my favorites. I mean, I have a lot of different favorites that it's like a ever shifting. There's like, depends on what part of me wakes up that day. I'll have that favorite. But Man of Wood and Wine really does speak to. You're right. You're absolutely right. It speaks to the mind. This poem is about the mind, and and what, for me, visualizations were built to connect to what I needed to find and after the damage. And breaking it down, it says, I hold to an old belief. I was told I would receive reprieve in sleep, and the best thing for someone who suffered from brain trauma is sleep.
Mm-hmm.
The brain repairs itself, I mean, very rapidly while you have sleep, and you'll be sleeping a lot when you have a brain injury because the energy it takes to recover is enormous. You will get less hours awake than you will asleep for a while, and then that's a belief that I'd held as an insomniac, and watching the damage, of course, before all this, your memory develops very much so when you're in the formative age of your teen. It's not just your bones, it's not just your hormones. It's definitely your mind and the memory capability, and insomnia wrecked me there. And I was getting frustrated with how much I was sleeping. I felt like I was, no one wants to sleep their life away. And yeah, you go through the what the keep of my design constructed in sacred stone, a bastion fashioned in history where my mystery is known. Talking about my mind once again, it's you design your defenses in your head. You pick a visualization. Some people pick a more natural nature thing, but forest grove, a soothing part of the beach with a cave. Everyone has their own kind of, you could say, a patronus of the mind equivalent, whatever it is that uniquely is yours that takes shape. For me, it was a ruins of a castle in the forest. But then you go to my opera house, my phylactery, my brightest memory shown, a temple between the temples, a place to atone. It's a transmutive experience. Basically, the more you give yourself the flexibility to change how you perceive your mind, the more access to different parts of your mind that you'll get. It's comparable to making sure that you cycle through nostalgia instead of living in one form of it, because you'll get trapped and you'll never be able to access the others if you stay there too deeply. And then deep in the wood grown from the seeds I've sown, every tree a face or place I called home. And we go back to the visualization of that forest, and what my forest was each tree was a different person, a different particularly important thing, because what is a forest if not the sum of its many beautiful parts, and those trees, and each tree being connected to the root system of everything else, a full ecosystem. So nothing really truly is an island, especially in your life, in your mind. This is where you will find my life force, hearing the voices of different timbers and the campfires. I once sought my warmth, once roaring, now embers. And that's, the passage of the cycle of time. And this is just remarking not in a permanent end, because as we all know, the nature of fire is that you can start a forest fire with just embers. So don't take it as like, oh, the fire's died, this is the end. It's just, the parts of you that you might associate with, how would I describe this? Parts of you that you associate with an end, you can just comfortably say are just sleeping, ready to be rekindled. I've always constantly say that. It sneaks in. Although I hate that I have repetitive phrases because it creeps into different stories. And I mean to say, like, in the terms of a storyteller, if I speak through a character, I don't like that. Sometimes many characters will have a phrase that is me, not them, creeping through. And I will always say, it's not dead, it's sleeping. And that was basically a mantra for me to remind myself that, there's parts of us that just need that rest. They're not dead.
If I may, kind of also alluding to how small things can also, if there's enough of the small things that can build up into something bigger as well. As a way of also alluding to the small embers can be used to create a giant fire. Yes.
Exactly. Never discount the embers. I swear to God, it's amazing. We got to root for our underdogs, especially within ourselves. But yeah, I mean, I could really go and break down every line, but you guys get the aspect of it, and it's wonderful to read that Spiffshine, who has dealt with a unique experience, as well, connects to that, because brain surgery, goodness. That's a big deal. So it's, I'm sure you remember, exactly what I'm talking about needing to needing to learning to love the medicine, which is going to be a piece of you that you feel like is wasted time or isn't helping. It's this. It's like I said, no one wants to feel like they're sleeping their life away. But there are times when we need the rest. So if you take anything from this, rest. You deserve it. You need it, and you will. It's an investment. There are things that you can accomplish with rest after sleeping that you would never be able to accomplish on just raw willpower alone. And it took me a long time to grasp that. It reminds me of a game mechanic in a lot of video games or Dungeons and Dragons, and there's a game mechanic called the help action, which I think is a beautiful parallel. And you can give someone the help action to give them an advantage on their next roll. And so we'll say that you're giving yourself the help action. So someone says, "Why waste a turn?" With the help action when you could just be taking consecutive actions. And there is something to be understated that, or to be said that, getting to roll with advantage, getting to roll with a higher degree of percentile success, we're talking about changing a die roll from, 1 out of 20 to you get that 2 out of 20. Even if it's actually statistically greater because you get the benefit of choosing the higher of two. Some people will say, "I wasted my turn. I wasted, my day by resting." But the next day you have advantage, and the next day it's an almost imperceptible, but it really is there, a statistical boon. We're talking about dodging nat ones because we got that rest. We're talking about getting that natural 20 way more likely. So I really, really want people to, my insomniacs who struggle, or people who are workaholics, or people who just fear that they're wasting certain things by not grinding through the hustle and grind culture that we live in. Please rest.
No.
Critter.
Am I calling you out?
Maybe.
Critter.
I think that mostly covered.
Bird.
Hold on, I've got something in the back.
One moment, please.
I hope I didn't close the wrong window. Okay, we're good. So while I don't specifically, yes, Graham, don't specifically have a question, I do have something to tell all of you. Is that while everything was happening, on my end, in my chat, a certain somebody bought all of you tickets to this month's giveaway.
Ooh!
Thank you so much.
All of you have now been entered in this month's Lego Pokemon giveaway.
Oh, what?
Oh,
Tell us about this giveaway. That's amazing.
Oh, so she's got some awesome Lego Pokemon that she's been putting together.
So I
Sure.
build Pokemon. I build Lego and stuff like that when I'm not gaming. Charmander. Ah.
Charmander.
It's adorable.
But I have an extra box for this month's giveaway.
Oh my gosh.
It comes with all 4 of the OG.
That's
oh my
so
goodness.
cool. Oh,
Yes, all
wow.
4 of the
I
OGs.
want it.
Love
We've been entered
that.
into the giveaway, so
For people who are interested in entering, how can they best enter? So my people can.
You go on my channel. You buy your tickets with channel points. You can buy your tickets anytime that I'm streaming until the end of the month. And then at the end of the month, I will do my final build where I build the Pikachu. And at the end of doing that, all the tickets go in a little wheel. You spin it, and then somebody will win.
It's amazing. That's cool.
You don't have to buy anything or whatever, and it doesn't matter where you live. If it can get mailed to you, I will send it.
All right. I'm very
Yay.
interested. That's cool. Thank you to whoever was that. Can we thank them by their...
That was Kieran.
Thank you.
Thank you, Taryn.
You're awesome.
Like Tira Phoenix?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
thank you. And I believe, so
I've actually just dropped the link in the chat, so.
yeah,
awesome.
the link to Critter's Twitch channel is in the chat now. So if you guys wanted to go and do all of that, you can now.
Lady Punnett.
So I believe you self-published this book, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Is there a reason you decided to go the way of self-publishing over a publishing house?
everything I read and researched basically said self-publishing was the way until you get to a point where you're working with, like, if you're working with pretty big commitments in terms of like a fictional trilogy or things of that nature that have, you know, a bit more, I guess, just bit bigger commitments to them where you're going to need a lot of help in the subject matter. But that's kind of what publishing houses kind of do, is they help a degree of the workload. There's different contract arrangements where, you know, you can get hooked up with an editor. They give you goals, they give you targets, they do a lot of shouldering the burdens. But the research I kind of needed for just this one anthology, and for anyone who's just starting out with just a simple, you know, one book thing, do it yourself and avoid the headache. And it's just, it's really, it's a lot easier. I know that the scariness is I don't know what to do, but, you know, look up on YouTube. There's amazing, YouTube is like one of those amazing resources where there's a lot of really kind and amazing people with very relevant information, just wanting to help demystify the process. And that's what helped me, gave me all the confidence I needed that this wasn't going to be the headache I thought it was. In fact, the headache was just really me anticipating what I, you know, more than it was doing it. So once I was like going through the process and things like that, it was easy, way easier. Now, if you're writing, you know, I'm also writing, you know, my plan is to write a trilogy of fiction. In fact, oh my God, I actually am writing a. I've been coerced by my own chat channel group to write. You're gonna get a kick out of this. I'm writing a spicy novel called Hard Goliath, an actual full novel, because in one of my D&D campaigns, one of the players was like, I'm looking in the library of this, you know, wizard's library or whatever, for a spicy, is there spicy smut of all their books? And I was like, of course, you find, you know, roll for it. They got a real high roll there. I was like, okay, you find a book called Hard Goliath, and it's about, you know, a Goliath, you know, and you know, the classic bodice ripping classic. And it got to the point where in my channel, if you go to my channel for free follow, you can find a preview of what I've been working with as the first entries, which apparently my chat can tell you it's hot as hell. It's about a young artificer, a young, you know, a young woman artificer, daughter of an artificer, who has taken up somewhat degree of learning her father's trade before he you know, he passed. She is trying to defend her home from bandits on the Pioneer, on the D&D kind of style Pioneer, not like Western Pioneer, but high fantasy Pioneer, the Western frontier element. And so she comes across this powerful Goliath who's a badass warrior of the high mountain tribes. And she makes a desperate deal with him because she realizes she needs to protect her people, because that was her father's responsibility of being a member of the artificers. And she says, you know, name your price, I'll pay it. Please help me destroy these bandits. And he goes and kills these bandits with his bare hands because he's gnarly. And he names his price her and her body. And he, you know, basically gets that point where that becomes that bodice ripper story where every full moon he's going to come from the mountains and take his prize. And she gets it in her head that that she can come out on top of this arrangement, so to speak. And it involves magic. So you'll have like you know, some scenes where there are certain spells that can be used in ways that you guys might have fantasized about, you know, especially, you know, magic ropes and things like that. So anyway, so check it out. I am actually going to be writing a trilogy called Hard Goliath, Harder Goliath, and Hardest Goliath, because I have to stick to the hilarious cheesiness of the D&D element of that creation.
Of course.
So. Oh gosh, this is just making me think about how I should probably do something like that for my campaign too, because in the campaign that I run with Lady Punnet and Blazewing here as two of my players, there have been...
Who would be the most likely to go find smut book?
Yeah.
Now that I think of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can even...
Especially with the libraries that we have in my world right now.
I mean, I can read a small segment of it if you guys want, or we can move on and just let people kind of visit the channel. I don't want to take up your
I
time.
think
Yeah.
you might get in trouble.
Yeah, unfortunately, as much as I would love that, might be something we could we
Fair.
could potentially talk about
Oh,
alternative
avoid
methods
the-
for.
Right, fair enough.
Or like a non super smutty segment of it, like the really tame segment.
All right, let me see
The
here.
more story heavy bit that doesn't involve the smut, because like we don't want to get in trouble.
All
Astra in
right,
the
I'm
chat.
gonna quickly read this paragraph in my head while you guys are talking to make sure I can avoid the things that I've known Twitch personally to look for.
While you're doing that, actually, Nix's Rose had a question earlier. She'd love to know how you decided the final title of your book.
Oh, Lost in the Woods. Yes. So I wrote a poem called Lost in the Woods, and I really just found that the title of that poem spoke to the nature of what it felt like to get lost in the woods, or the would or would not element of life, and that poem and the poetry itself. I would say it's a beautiful thing to allow your mind the freedom to think what can happen, what magic, like we unfortunately have the double-edged sword, and a lot of us fall into the trap of going, what if something bad happens? But every therapist, mental health professional I've ever spoken to, and unfortunately I've spoken to a lot, has always kind of really came back with, what if you succeed? Imagine a world where you get what you actually are fighting for, because you're fighting so hard. Why waste that fight on doubt? If you're going to fight this hard, you might as well imagine the outcome being good. And sure enough, I fell in love with that concept, and so I said, well, let's get lost in it. Let's get lost in the possibilities. Let's get lost in the woods. The wood, what could and would happen. And so I made sure not to say lost on the coulds, because I wanted certain positivity in the word. It will happen. It would happen. So, and I love to play on words with wood of lumber and forest in that. So it was really fun finding an artist and commissioning them to get that cover picture just the way I wanted it, which is a portal in the woods going into a library of the mind, which is what that is. All right, I found a paragraph that does not violate the guidelines.
A safe for work paragraph.
Let's go for it.
All right. All right. I enjoyed you. You and that ash-covered wall. And that bed of moss. And my hand climbing up your back to clamp down on your small neck. You and your trembling voice calling to your weak and wilted gods. Your cry, louder with my every growl against your ear, encouraging you to sunder yourself against my wolf-hungry lips. Lips that speak no lies. Lips that seek your shudders out like the prey animal you are. Lips that have never known restraint. You called for rain, and you found me, the storm from the spine of the world. Your eyes and fingers trace the pattern of my scars. You'll know my designs when you close your eyes and feel the heat rush between your legs. For I have brought 1,000 warriors to their knees in countless battles, but it is your knees falling to my feet that hits sweetest of all. Sweet as the first fall of autumn leaves. I cannot possibly cleave away the image of you shaking against my grip, while your moans betray you, begging for more. More pain, more pleasure, more of what you never knew and had always craved. In the darkness behind closed doors, you held your world at bay. But in the darkness behind your closed eyes, there I own you. You will never know when I'm going to come down from these mountains to claim you. And if you run, I will chase you. If you hide, I will find you. And if you fight, I will bend and bind you. Remember, you begged me to destroy the bandits. You offered me treasures.
You said you'd pay my price. I felled the bandits of your small, unblooded foothill village, and I chose the sweet nectar of your blushing flower as my treasure. The price of pumping like a second heartbeat against your hips. It is not a price that just any can pay. You are worthy of my vigor until the drums of war call me back to the mountains, or until you break from fatigue. With your foreign softness, I expect the latter, but you'll learn, or you'll be sore for days as a reminder of our pact until the next full moon.
So, first of all, Lady Punnet, Dragon, are you guys okay?
Ah!
Let's do a pulse check.
Fine. Everything's fine.
We're good. Everything is fine.
Who
Also-
says everything is just a fire around us?
Lady Punnet, I think you might need to let your cat breathe once in a while.
He's fine. He's used to this.
I think I need to open my office door so that way the AC air can like get filtered in with like my fan, just trying to circulate the air. Maybe, I don't know.
Mhm.
But I don't want my cat coming in here and trying to chew on everything. So here I am.
The euphemisms are getting out of control.
I love it. It's not the only thing getting out of control, apparently.
Well said.
Dang.
With that,
So,
I have one final thing to ask before I start to wrap up this episode. You, sir, have been known to do a thing or two on TikTok, specifically
oh shit.
growling.
Yeah.
Can you give us one?
You want me to growl? I can growl. Just this once. So I have my mic settings. Sometimes they will, as you guys know, you probably have settings where like they'll mute certain decibels of noise. So I'm going to growl and I hope that those settings don't interfere here. All right. So I'm going to. So I need for me to get into the moment. I'm going to turn off my camera here, because as a nice helpful tip, it's best to not have to be concerned with what you look like when you try to invoke the growl. All right. This is fun. I'm really happy you gave me this request. It's been a while. All right, I'm going to do a practice growl while muted to make sure my voice is there, and then I'm going to hit you guys with it.
Okay.
I'm having to brace myself for this.
Did that come through at all?
No.
Oh, did it mute? It muted it. All right, I'm going to try again. How about that? Did it go all the way through? Did it mute halfway?
Yeah, we heard that.
All right. All right. Well, sorry, the first growl was louder and a bit more tense, but the mic muted it, so I had to kind of lower it. Wait, what happened?
Nothing. Something fell down. Why are my cats leaving me?
Why are my cats leaving me?
I'm just over here muted myself screaming. It's fine.
I love you guys. Oh, I missed this.
That was awesome.
Oh,
Thanks for
man.
being such a sport.
Of course. Anything for my friends. If you'll allow me to plug in some stuff before we go, to let people
Go
know where they
ahead.
can-
Please
where they can
do.
find- yeah, please join my Discord community. And if one of my Discord peeps can plug that in, or whoever, while I'm kind of rambling here, yeah, you can get access to all the fun scheduling of what's going on our streams. We do Dungeons and Dragons almost exclusively, but we do a lot of fun. We do things like kind of educational content, teaching people about role play and game mechanics, but we are always running multiple stories that are subtly interwoven and connected, called the Charmverse, because I love making almost every D&D one shot or anything I do have some connection to the main arcing story. We're on season 3, which is every Friday and Sunday. 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, so that's of great interest. It's called Shadows of Samaria. It's high level. They're like level 17th level, or
Ooh.
I think they're 17th, 16th or 17th level
Ooh.
right now, and they are awesome. They're incredible. 17th. Thank you, Monica. We do a one shot that's based on Peter Pan the book, because I have to say the book for copyright reasons. And that's Saturdays, I believe. And the party is it's basically, if it's called The Menace of Neverland, and it's based on Peter Pan being the villain and Captain Hook being the good guy, a really sexy good guy. So there is that. I'm in. You son of a bitch, I'm in. Let's see. Thank you, Monica, for posting the Discord link. Awesome. You're fast. I love it. We have a.
Do like one shot giveaway things? Or
I do. Yeah. So we do one shot giveaways where if you're part of my membership program on my Ko-Fi, you automatically get all these benefits. And one is like a number of entries, you always get access to the secret Discord, which I will start moving more of Hard Goliath towards the secret Discord. Because I want to put previews more in the main one. We do dice giveaways, which actually I'm holding now. The dice give. So you do cool stuff giveaways. I'm doing a giveaway with Slytherin dice. So if you know a Slytherin in your life, this is great. If you enter this giveaway, it also comes with a black cat dice bag, and this glows in the dark.
Oh,
and
I want it.
a picture of Pedro Pascal as Joel, which on the back I will write a handwritten one-of-a-kind poem for the winner. And sign that, so they will have a private piece of poetry history there. And yeah, you can join the Discord and check out where to join that. So check out my Ko-Fi, hang out there, and my Ko-Fi is also used to purchase points to influence the game. So you're not just an audience member in my Dungeons and Dragons games; you're actually a part of Destiny and Fate. And last night, last night we had a game where the chat and the party encountered a villain who interfere with chat's powers, and boy, did chat come swinging hard and heavy into that villain, because they did not like having some villain who could break the fourth wall in a way and stop chat for a moment. But chat wrecked it. It was cool. So yeah, we do many campaigns. We do raffles for getting a seat at the game. We do a little bit of celebrity guests, things of that nature. So if you know of a really popular D&D person in your field of awareness that would be capable of playing a 3.5-hour game and have that, like I said, their expertise in following smash in, let's send them our way to our Discord. I think that's it. But I had such a great time, you guys. I mean, how often do you guys interview authors? Because I feel like you do it a lot. Because
You're our first one, actually.
This was
Yep.
This is one of the better interviews, easily, because of just how you guys held space. You guys, 4 people and me. I always expect people to walk on each other's toes, but you guys found your rhythm, I guess, early on in your way of doing things. So that it's just such a relief not to have people talking over each other. So you guys do that exceptionally well, and every question was really good. You guys were prepared.
Even the waffle one?
Yeah, I love the waffle one, especially the waffle one. I actually never thought I would. I always expected someone to really call me out on what the hell's with that waffle poem. But yeah, that's it's really funny to get to explain. It was written in the time it took for someone to eat a waffle, more than anything.
Love it. It was awesome.
Yeah.
God.
Just before we close out, the reason we found our rhythm is we openly embrace the fact that we are neurodivergent. We understand that, we're going to have issues, that we're not always going to jive the best, and we try and work around those issues as much as we can, keeping the lines of communication open, that sort of thing.
It shows.
I appreciate that.
And we've basically taken the last, year to do that?
Yep.
And we're also all coming in from other servers and communities where we already knew each other as well. In fact, we actually started this book club. It started off as myself, Blaze, and Lady Punna here. We started this with a visual novel from the Vampire the Masquerade series. Or was it Doki Doki?
Coteries of New York. I think
Chicory's
it
in New
was-
York. Yeah.
Yeah.
Doki Doki was our second game.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it might have been a year, but in Neurospicy, it's like dog years. So
True.
True.
That's like forever.
We've trauma bonded.
Oh, I love
Yes!
that.
Yeah.
Yes, we did. Oh my
Oh.
fuck, we did.
We'll have to do some trauma bonding more because it's cathartic.
Yeah.
I would love to have you back at some point, but for today,
I'd love to be back.
thank you so much for coming to join us. I
Yeah.
appreciate you and the time that you have given us today. Your links, where can people find those?
Yeah, go to my Instagram, which is _oldworldcharm_, and there is the like link tree. You can also go to my website. I forgot my website. I do audios. God, I'm like missing out on even plugging myself in. arianscalise.com. I have my whole website, which connects to everything that I'm doing right now, and you can purchase spicy audios, which are very 20-minute long experiences of vampires or demons or cowboys or Scotsmen. Anyway, or you can do anti-anxiety audios, sleep audios, encouragement audios. So, but yeah, arianscalise.com. You can find links to my book, everything there. It's relatively new. That's why I forgot about it.
Dragon, are you looking it up right now?
Baby.
Uh-huh. Yep.
I was
Yeah, try to-
actually trying to look up like the Instagram because I remember you and I were talking over TikTok a while back, and I asked you about your Instagram because I was having issues like connecting.
Oh shit! Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had multiple people tell me that. So go to the website then, and that will help. Yeah, technology is kind of crappy, but that's why I built the website, is so I didn't have to rely on if TikTok gets shut down, if Instagram is acting ridiculous. So, yeah.
And it piqued my interest with like the sleep audios and the productivity audios.
Yeah,
because of
people have given me good
sleep.
reviews. These people in my chat will tell you, they're the best people for making sure there's nothing subpar, and I trust them to tell me. In fact, some of the people have actually even caught mistakes on my website, like my booking sessions are for coaching sessions were incorrect, and the data, they're just awesome. So I hope may my community infiltrate and boost yours, and may yours infiltrate and boost mine, because we got some great people in our chats.
Nice. Yeah, because I've been trying to put together like audios and whatnot for my upcoming drive to the East Coast, because I'm driving in this move with a giant freaking trailer to try to haul my stuff, and then I have my cat with me. But
This will pass the time.
yes.
Yeah, enjoy time with your cat, listening to audios.
Mm-hmm.
With that, I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode. So again, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
For this episode of the Idiot Book Nook podcast. My name is Blazewing.
I am the Reading Dragon.
I'm Lady Punnet.
Now I'm Critter Shy.
And I'm Charm.
And we'll see
And I'm
you
out.
guys next episode.
Yeah.
You guys are awesome.
Yay.
Thank you.
Take care.